What's up, everyone? It's Adar coming at you with another episode of Startup Engineering Daily. Let's hop right into it. So our first tweet for today is from Kyle, who is the chief operating officer at Github. Yesterday, they had an incident in their merge queue behavior where, in some cases, squash or rebase commits were generated from the wrong base state, making earlier changes appear reverted in branch history. They said 2,800 pull requests out of 4 million merged on the 23rd. Roughly 0.07% were affected. They fixed the issue. They contacted every impacted customer, and they're beginning to expand their automated test coverage for merge queue operations. The team will be updating the status page with RCA details as well. So yeah, this is a really wild incident. Definitely doesn't help GitHub standing currently with all of their uptime issues and their constant incidents. But a lot of people are really disappointed as well with this 0.07%, because if you have 2,800 pull requests where commits essentially went missing or were reverted or the wrong commits were applied, it seems like. There's been a lot of reports, but I haven't really found concrete details beyond this tweet, but nonetheless really crazy. And you can check out the status page if you want more details. And it definitely raises the question of is a GitHub competitor going to come out? And there was this tweet that someone found from 2013 or something. I think it was Primogen. That was Linus, who is the creator of Linux, also creator of Git. The tweet was Linus created Git, a decentralized version control system, just so that we could all have a single point of failure with GitHub. So pretty funny. It's one of those things that we've talked about before, where it's people are always going to go for centralized hosting, quote unquote sign in with Google is what I call it. Will always be the most preferred way of accessing software. But with super important systems like GitHub and code version control, maybe we'll see something in the future where we have more of a decentralized system, but I highly doubt it. And even with all of the incidents, and if you look at I think it's called the real GitHub status page, which isn't from GitHub themselves, but it's a third-party indie system, it shows that their uptime is really horrible, and people are still using it, and I don't think anyone's switching off anytime soon. And it's kind of interesting too, because I haven't really seen any marketing or growth or promo from GitLab or any of the other competitors, even though there are quite a few. Pretty much every hyperscaler and Atlassian as well has their own version of GitHub, but you don't really see too much marketing or growth from them. So I know people use them, but there is so much opportunity for them, but it's interesting that they're not really promoting it. Okay, next we have a tweet from Matt Pocock, who is known previously as the TypeScript guy, but now he's more of an AI course creator, and he did this talk at the AI Engineer Conference in Europe, which was pretty interesting. I watched it 18 minutes long, but just on 2x, but it's pretty simple. He just talks about skills that he uses to create tickets. So he has this /grill me, and then he has a create PRD, and then he has create issues. So that's kind of the hierarchy that he uses, and we talked previously about what is the optimal hierarchy for completing stories or completing epics, which is Jira terminology, or I guess Agile terminology you could say as well. But just pretty interesting. He goes into principles and kind of saying that software fundamentals matter more than ever, which is what we've talked about a lot. He talks about how domain-driven design and ubiquitous language is really important. I think the domain-driven design book is pretty interesting, and one of my colleagues and friends put me onto it 5 years ago, and I did read it. There's a lot of different constructs that you have to remember, but ubiquitous language is one of the main ones, which is you want to be able to talk with the subject matter experts. So for example, if you're building accounting software and you're working with an accountant, you want to use the language that they use, as opposed to just creating new constructs in code. You want the code to kind of reflect what they're talking about. So when you explain the functionality of the software, it would pretty much sound the same way as if they were talking amongst themselves. So pretty interesting, pretty good video. I definitely recommend watching it, especially on 2x. It's quite simple and easy to digest, but definitely cool, and you can check out his skills as well if you want to use them in your own projects. Okay, next we have a tweet from Aaron Levy, who is the CEO of Box, which is a enterprise version of Dropbox essentially for file storage, and it's 20 years old plus startup. It was kind of one of the original San Francisco startups, I think in the early 2000s, Post.com, and he's replying to a tweet from Anthony Pompliano, which basically he was saying, "I have changed my mind on how AI will impact jobs in America. Previously, I believed AI will replace many entry-level roles filled by young employees. Technology would then work its way up to the organization and eventually reduce the total number of jobs. But now that people are realizing that, like Aaron's saying, if AI can make employees more productive, which is widely accepted as fact, then companies are going to want as many productive units of labor as possible. This is a key reason why I'm changing my mind." And Aaron's speaking on this. This is why Jevons paradox is really important to understand with AI right now. And Jevons paradox is the idea. It's been seen a lot in technological improvements, especially electricity is one of the main ones, where it's as efficiency goes up, so the cost of usage goes down, it creates more use cases. So as efficiency goes up, and the cost of usage goes down, you would think theoretically that the overall usage would go down, because now you have some X amount of spend, and that spend is less to get the same result. You would think that the total would go down, but since the spend goes down, you actually have a lot more ability to create new things, or companies that couldn't have existed before, or products that couldn't have utilized that technology in a certain way now become able to utilize that technology because the cost has gone down and it's become more efficient. So actually the overall use goes up as things become more efficient. And electricity was one of the main ones that you could see with this, with Jevons paradox. But with AI, it was kind of clear to a lot of people from the beginning, but it's becoming clear again in this tweet here that, as AI becomes better and becomes cheaper, then more companies can afford to use it. Or the example that Aaron's using here is that companies can take on these tasks of engineering to hire hire people to do surrounding work. So for example, a small business that couldn't afford to build complex software can now afford to hire people to get the 5 to 10x return on that investment. The only thing I would say is that like it's not necessarily always going to be that 5 to 10x per engineer, right? There is a limit on how much can be delivered, but recent reports have showed that companies are now hiring and the market is actually looking pretty good for jobs. I mean, I can't speak as someone unemployed, and I'm sure it's really hard to still get that interview. And, there's a lot of AI automation in terms of like applying to jobs. So you kind of have to work around or like work with a recruiter or get a referral from someone who already works at one of these companies. But nonetheless, these companies are really incentivized to hire people and to kind of get ahead of the game and deliver more software, and it's like the same idea with Jevons paradox, kind of, that like people thought they would be working less with AI, but it's actually now that AI is so good, people are working more, and it's so much more cognitively intensive because you don't have the downtime of writing code. It's all kind of like decision making. So really interesting, and like who knows where it's going to come to a head, right? Like it's kind of always been like the more efficient we've become as software engineers, the more demand there is for our work. So the more we have to work or kind of decide to, I guess, to stay ahead of the game and stay competitive. But we'll have to see like once maybe we reach a certain turning point where it's like, okay, now that we have like proper AGI, artificial general intelligence, that like we don't do any work whatsoever. But even then it's like, who's going to coordinate those things and like what will the new technology create? Like if we have skyscrapers being built everywhere or whatever, then that'll be something to think about. And I think Ray Kurzweil talks about this, like one of these authors, and there's another author too, I forget what his name is, but he talked about like, kind of a fictional superintelligence future, and it's pretty interesting books and stuff like that you could check out, but we'll have to see. And, interesting seeing from these guys, obviously these are the CEOs, so they're making the most money from the efficiency gains compared to like the employees themselves. But as demand increases, so will wages theoretically, but it's hard to say. And obviously people that are not working in knowledge work are going to suffer the most from increasing technology. But that's also where it's like, I think Sam Altman said this, where like people used to light the streetlights at night, but when electricity came, we stopped needing to do that, but we created enough jobs to fill those empty roles. So something to think about. Okay, and last we have a tweet from this guy Lenny, who's speaking on his biggest takeaways from Claude Code's head of product, Kat Wu. And I'll just kind of go through all of them and then we can kind of recap a little bit. So his first one is that Anthropic's product development timelines have gone from 6 months to 1 month, sometimes 1 week, sometimes 1 day. Part of this acceleration is access to the latest models, i.e. Mythos, which someone was joking about in the comments. I totally agree with them that like, if Mythos is so good, why does Claude have so many bugs and so many issues? But nonetheless, they're saying that these new models make shipping new products into research preview very easy, and you can experiment with them, and they might not be supported, but you kind of have this evergreen launch room where engineers post ready features and marketing turns around and announcements the next day. And then number 2 is that the PM role is shifting from coordinating multi-month roadmaps to enabling teams to ship daily. As Kat puts it, there should be less emphasis on making sure you're aligning your multi-quarter roadmaps with your partner teams and more emphasis on how can we figure out the fastest way to get something out the door. 3, the most efficient shipping unit is an engineer with great product taste. On Kat's team, many engineers go end-to-end from seeing user feedback on Twitter to shipping a product by the end of the week without a PM involved. Almost all of the PMs on Claude Code team have been engineers or ship code themselves, and the designers have been front-end engineers. The roles are merging, and the most valuable skill is product taste, not job title. This one's interesting. Number 4, build products that are on the edge of working. Claude Code's code review product failed multiple times because earlier models weren't accurate enough, but because the prototype was already built, they could swap in Opus 4.5 and 4.6 and immediately test whether the gap was closed. Teams that wait for the model to be ready will always be a cycle behind. 5, the most underrated skill for building AI products is asking the model to introspect on its own mistakes. Kat regularly asks the model why it made an unexpected decision. The model will explain that something in the system prompt was confusing, or that a delegated verification to a sub-agent that didn't check its work. This reveals what misled the model so the team can fix the harness. 6, every model forces their team to revisit existing products and audit their system prompt to remove features the model no longer needs. So for example, Claude's to-do list was a crutch for earlier models that couldn't track their own work. With Opus 4, the model handles it natively. Features built to scaffolding for weaker models become dead when the model catches up, so the team actively strips them. 7, Anthropic employees build custom internal tools. Instead of buying SaaS products, a lot of people were talking about this, so they don't use Notion, Linear, or Figma. They just use Claude, Cowork, and Slack. And then 8, people underestimate how much Claude's personality contributes to his success. When you reflect on everyone you've worked with, there's some people where you're like, I really like their energy, their vibe, and they kind of design Claude to be like a person, which I guess is kind of dystopian per se, but also when you're working with an AI agent like this, you want like a good personality and you want like someone, quote unquote, that you'd be working with nicely. And then 9, the future of work is managing fleets of AI agents, not doing the work yourself. First, individual tasks become successful, then people start running multiple tasks at the same time. Next, people will run 50 or 100 tasks simultaneously. The human role shifts from doing the work to knowing which tasks to look into, verifying outputs, and giving feedback that makes the system better over time. And then 10, hire people who lean into chaos and face every challenge with a smile. At Anthropic, there are weeks where P0 on Sunday becomes P0 by Monday and P000 by Monday afternoon. If you get too stressed about one thing, you'll burn out. The team looks for people who can look at a hard challenge and say, wow, it's going to be hard, but I'm excited to tackle it, etc. And there's a YouTube video that has the full conversation. So starting from the top, their product development timelines have gone from 6 months to 1 month, sometimes 1 week, sometimes 1 day. This is one of those things where it's like, if you're building an internal system that only works with your system itself and your API, then you can do something like this. Whereas if you're working with external products or you're doing like integrations with existing companies, it becomes more complicated. You still have to do the human back and forth. You have to work within their systems. You have to suggest feedback, kind of have to come to a conclusion of what the best solution might be. So this is kind of biased, but it makes sense if you're just building something like a Claude Code feature for your internal system. The PM role is shifting from coordinating multi-month roadmaps. So kind of similar to the thing above, but like, yes, multi-quarter roadmaps might not be as important, but it's also like, how are we going to deliver something with taste, which is what they're saying in number 3 as well. which is like not all engineers have it, and engineers are really more important in my opinion for like security and reliability and building scalable software. And that's where you can also have like a product person who brings the taste, and you want your engineers to have it. But in terms of like what the trade-offs are, like you do really want engineers who understand computer science and understand software fundamentals, like the Matt Pocock video we talked about. So maybe the roles are merging a little bit, and it's always good to have generalists, especially at startups, but still you want people who are really engineering driven, not necessarily always fully product driven. And that's where you have subject matter experts, and that's where you have DDD and ubiquitous language. Build products that are on the edge of working. This is super fascinating. I totally agree with this. This is where like, Cursor started in 2023 and now is getting acquired for 60 billion potentially. And just all of these products that are being built right now, AI is going to catch up to them eventually. Maybe Yan LeCun's right, and like LLMs won't reach the full potential and we'll have to move to a different model. But it is really cool and interesting to see how harnesses are being built right now around these systems that might not necessarily have been there, or like, were built on GPT 3.5, but now have really caught up because of Opus. So I totally agree with this. And it's really cool to like imagine a future where AI gets better, and then you have the harnesses, or you have the tools, or the network effects, or the underlying systems that can really be caught up once the AI gets there. And then for number 9, the future of work is managing fleets of AI agents, not doing the work yourself. People agree with this. I tend to agree with this as well, where it's like you're not going to be reviewing every line of code. If you look at like what people did when they built compilers, it's like nobody reads the assembly anymore. But it's also like the people that were building the compilers still need to read the assembly, So in my opinion, as long as we're still using the existing systems like GitHub, TypeScript, etc., and generated code, HTML, JavaScript, databases, you still kind of have to understand how the systems work under the hood. You can't fully trust that like a written report from AI or a specific chat response is going to be the source of truth. Like the code that's actually running and the systems that exist are going to be the source of truth. So you can run 50 to 100 tasks simultaneously, but I just don't really know what the value of that output is going to be. And it's going to be so cognitively overwhelming to review that I still think there is kind of a synchronous workflow that happens in coding, but I could be wrong. I know one of my colleagues really believes in the idea of like these overnight Ralph loops, and he really believes that's where the future's headed, or even the future is there now. But I experimented with it. I kind of just woke up to a bunch of draft PRs that were really complicated to review, and I felt like I just still had to do a lot of the work myself, and it makes a lot more sense to me to still kind of like drive the features forward or drive the tickets forward, but use AI to just do the coding and then review at the end. But I don't know, it's definitely something that I might be a skill issue on my end, so we'll have to see how we catch up. But still pretty interesting to get the inside baseball though from the Anthropic team. This kind of stuff interests you and you want to talk with some like-minded people, join the Audinato Discord in the description. Thanks.